He was screaming so hard his tiny body was shaking, surrounded by powerful men, luxury, and silence, but no one dared to touch him. Not his father. Not the guards. Not even the staff. And then, a poor waitress broke every rule in that room. She knelt in front of a rich man's son, looked into his terrified eyes, and called him one word. Son. That single word didn't just stop the boy from screaming. It exposed a secret that would destroy an empire. If stories like this move your heart, make sure you subscribe, because some truths deserve to be heard. The night it all began, the rain hadn't stopped for hours. Chicago felt heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. Inside one of the most expensive restaurants in River North, everything looked perfect on the surface. Crystal glasses, polished silverware, quiet conversations between wealthy men who controlled more than just businesses. This wasn't a place for ordinary people. It was where power sat down for dinner. And Clara Hamilton didn't belong there. At 28, she worked long shifts just to survive. A small apartment, overdue bills, and a silence waiting for her every night that felt heavier than anything money could fix. She had learned the rules quickly. Don't look at the guests unless they speak to you. Don't listen to conversations. And never, ever, get involved. Because the people who came here weren't just rich. They were dangerous. That night, the doors opened, and everything changed. The black SUVs outside were the first sign. Inside, conversations slowed. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Even the owner, Lorenzo, turned pale as he rushed toward Clara. Table 7. Now, he whispered sharply, gripping her arm. That's Martin Moretti. Clara felt her chest tighten. Everyone knew that name. A man worth billions, feared more than respected. A widower. A father. And someone no one ever said no to. The doors opened fully. First came the guards. Tall, sharp, watching everything. Then came a man who didn't need to raise his voice to control a room. Martin Moretti. Dressed in a perfect dark suit, calm, controlled, but there was something cold about him. Like grief had turned into something harder. But it wasn't him who broke the silence. It was the boy. A small child, no older than 5, dressed like a miniature version of his father, completely falling apart. He wasn't just crying. He was screaming. The kind of scream that didn't come from anger, but from fear. His face was red, tears pouring, his little hands shaking as he pushed away anyone who came close. No, no. Stop, he cried, his voice cracking. The entire room froze. No one moved. Not the rich men. Not the staff. Not even his father. Martin tried to pick him up, but the boy fought back harder, slipping from his grip and collapsing onto the floor. The scream echoed again, louder this time. And something about it, something about that sound, made Clara stop breathing for a moment. Because she had heard that kind of cry before. Not in a restaurant, but in a hospital. 5 years ago. Smoke. Panic. Sirens. A tiny baby taken from her arms before she could even say goodbye properly. They told her he didn't survive. But they never showed her proof. And ever since that day, Clara had been living like a shadow of herself. Now, standing there with a tray in her hands, she wasn't seeing a rich man's child. She was seeing a scared little boy, drowning in something no one around him understood. The boy kicked wildly, knocking into a table. A glass shattered on the floor. The sharp sound snapped the room even tighter. One of the guards reached toward his jacket instinctively, like even a child's chaos could turn into danger here. "Grab him," Martin said quietly, his voice heavy with frustration. "Take him out." The large guard stepped forward. The boy backed away instantly, pressing himself against the wall, breathing fast, too fast. Clara felt it in her chest. That wasn't just crying. That was panic. He's going to stop breathing, she thought. Her fingers tightened around the tray. Her heart pounded. Every rule she had ever learned screamed at her to stay back. But something stronger, something deeper, pulled her forward. "Clara, don't," Lorenzo whispered urgently from behind. But she was already moving. Step by step. Every eye in the room followed her. A poor waitress, walking straight into the center of power. The guard blocked her path immediately. "Back off," he growled. Clara didn't step back. "He can't breathe," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear rising inside her. "If you grab him now, it'll get worse." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Martin's voice came. Low. Controlled. "Let her." The guard stepped aside. Clara moved closer. Slowly, carefully. She didn't stand over the boy. She knelt down. Right there, on the expensive floor. Ignoring the broken glass beneath her knees. Ignoring the powerful men watching her every move. She made herself small, calm, safe. "It's too loud, isn't it?" she said gently. The boy didn't answer, but his kicks slowed just a little. "All these people, all these sounds," she continued softly. "It feels like your chest is too tight." One tear-filled eye opened, looking at her. Clara took a slow breath. "When I get scared," she whispered, "my heart feels like a bird trying to escape." The boy's hand moved to his chest. A small nod. Clara reached into her apron, pulling out a folded cloth. She placed it gently on the floor between them. "This is a cloud," she said softly. "You have to blow on it to make it move." The boy stared at it. His breathing was still uneven, but slower now. "Try," she encouraged. He took a shaky breath and blew. Nothing happened. "Again," she whispered. This time, a little stronger. The cloth shifted slightly. The boy blinked. Something changed in his eyes. A tiny spark of focus. Of control. And Clara leaned just a little closer, her voice softer than before. "It's okay to be loud sometimes," she said. Then, without thinking, without realizing what she was about to awaken, she whispered the one word that would change everything. "Son." The word lingered in the air, soft, fragile, but impossibly powerful. For a moment, even the room seemed to forget how to breathe. The boy stopped. Not slowly, not gradually. Completely. His small body went still, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths as his tear-filled eyes locked onto Clara's face. It was as if something deep inside him had been reached, something no one else had managed to touch. The screaming was gone. Just like that. Clara felt it too, that strange pull, like a thread connecting two broken pieces that were never meant to be apart. She didn't move, didn't rush, just stayed there, close enough to be safe, far enough not to scare him. "It hurts your throat when you scream like that," she said gently, her voice warm, steady. "You don't have to do that anymore. I'm right here." The boy's lips trembled. His fingers slowly unclenched from tight fists into something softer, uncertain. And then he moved. One step. Small, hesitant. Then another. Until suddenly, without warning, he closed the distance between them and threw himself into her arms. The impact was light, but it hit Clara like a storm. His tiny body pressed against her chest, his face buried into her shoulder as his fingers clutched her uniform tightly, like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. Clara froze. Her arms hovered for half a second. Then instinct took over. She wrapped them around him. Firm. Protective. Natural. Like she had done it 1,000 times before. The scent of his hair, soft, clean. Something about it hit her deep in the chest. A memory she couldn't quite reach, but felt in her bones. Her throat tightened. "Sure. I've got you," she whispered, closing her eyes for just a moment. The entire restaurant sat in stunned silence. Men who had built empires, who had seen violence, betrayal, and power plays, were now watching something they couldn't control. A poor waitress, holding a rich man's son, like he belonged to her. And the boy wasn't fighting it. He was calming. Slowly. His breathing steadied. His grip loosened just enough, but not enough to let go. Clara felt the tension in his body melting, piece by piece, like ice finally meeting warmth. And for a brief second, she forgot where she was. Forgot who was watching. Forgot the rules. All she felt was the weight of a child in her arms. The kind of weight that felt right. The kind of weight that made her heart ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. Then, a hand grabbed her arm. Hard. The moment shattered instantly. Clara gasped softly as she was pulled upward, forced to stand while still holding the boy tightly against her chest. Her eyes lifted, and met his. Martin Moretti stood inches away, close enough for her to see every detail in his expression. The sharp lines of his face, the controlled tension in his jaw, and something else. Something darker. Not just anger. Something closer to confusion, mixed with disbelief. His gaze shifted briefly to his son, who remained pressed against Clara, calm, quiet, almost peaceful. Then back to her. "What did you just call him?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It carried weight, the kind that made people listen, the kind that made people obey. Clara's heart pounded. Every instinct told her to apologize, to step back, to fix what she had just done. But she didn't. She held the boy a little tighter instead, and lifted her chin. "I called him what he needed," she said quietly. "A son." A ripple passed through the room. Subtle, but heavy. One of the men at a nearby table shifted uncomfortably. Another looked away entirely. Because everyone knew. She had crossed a line that didn't exist for people like her. Martin's expression didn't change immediately, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Dangerous. You don't get to decide that," he said slowly. Clara swallowed. Her voice trembled, but she didn't let it break. "No," she replied softly. "But right now, he doesn't need power. He doesn't need control." She glanced down at the boy in her arms. "He needs someone who isn't going to scare him." Silence. Thick. Uncomfortable. The kind that made time stretch. Martin stared at her. Long enough for the tension to build. Long enough for everyone to wonder what would happen next. Then finally, he moved. His grip on her arm loosened. Not completely, but enough. He looked at his son again, and for the first time since he had entered that room, something shifted in his face. Not weakness, but something close to it. A crack in the armor. His son wasn't screaming, wasn't fighting, wasn't breaking things. He was quiet, safe, in the arms of a stranger. Martin let out a slow breath, then spoke. "Clear the room." The command was calm, but absolute. Chairs moved quickly. Conversations ended without a word. Within seconds, the powerful men who had filled the space disappeared, leaving behind only silence and tension. The staff followed just as fast. Except Clara, and the boy, and Martin. The door closed behind the last person. Now it was just the three of them. Clara's pulse raced. The quiet felt heavier now, more dangerous. Martin stepped closer again, slower this time. Measured. "You're not from this world," he said, studying her carefully. It wasn't a question. Clara shook her head slightly. "No." He nodded once, as if confirming something in his mind. Then his eyes dropped to his son again. The boy had loosened his grip just enough to peek up at his father, but he didn't leave Clara's arms. Didn't even try. Martin noticed. Of course he did. A long pause followed. Then, "You're coming with us." The words landed like a weight. Clara blinked. "What?" His gaze returned to hers. Sharp. "Certain. Get your things," he said. "You're coming with us." Her heart skipped. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I'm not going anywhere." A faint smile touched his lips, but it wasn't warm. "You don't understand," he said quietly, and something in his tone, something calm, controlled, made her chest tighten. "This isn't a request." Clara felt the air shift, felt the invisible walls closing in around her, and for the first time since she had stepped forward, fear truly settled in. She held the boy closer, instinctively, protectively, not realizing yet that this single moment had already changed the course of her life forever. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She stood there, frozen, the boy still clinging to her as if she were the only safe place left in the world. His small fingers tightened in her shirt, his face pressed into her shoulder again, like he already knew what those words meant, even if she didn't. "You can't be serious," she said quietly, her voice unsteady now. "I have a job. I have a life. I'm not just leaving." Martin didn't raise his voice, didn't step closer, but the way he looked at her, steady, unwavering, made it clear he wasn't someone used to hearing no. "You already left," he said calmly. Clara frowned, confused. "What does that even mean?" "It means," he continued, his tone even, "the moment you touched him, you stepped into something you can't walk away from." Her grip on the boy tightened instinctively. "That's not how life works," she said, shaking her head. "You don't just decide things for people." Martin studied her for a long second. Then his gaze shifted to his son again. The boy hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, just held on to Clara like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. Martin's jaw flexed slightly. "He hasn't let anyone hold him like that," he said, more to himself than to her. "Not since." He stopped. Something passed through his expression. Brief. Controlled. Gone just as quickly. Clara noticed it anyway. Grief. The kind that doesn't go away. It just hides. "He's scared," she said softly. "Anyone would be." Martin's eyes snapped back to hers. "He has everything he could ever need." Clara swallowed, then shook her head gently. "No," she said. "He has everything money can buy." The words hung between them. Sharp. Honest. Dangerous. For a moment, it felt like she had pushed too far. But then the boy shifted slightly in her arms, his breathing steady now, calm in a way that didn't match the chaos from just minutes ago. Martin saw it too, and that changed something. He exhaled slowly. "You're coming," he repeated, quieter this time. "At least for tonight." Clara hesitated. Her mind raced. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was stepping into a world she had spent years trying to stay invisible in. A world where people like her didn't have choices. But then she looked down. At the boy. His eyelashes still wet from tears. His small hand gripping her like he was afraid she might disappear the second he let go. Her chest tightened painfully. She remembered another small hand, years ago, reaching for her. And then gone. The memory hit like a wave. She closed her eyes for a second, just a second, then opened them again. "If I go," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, "it's not because you told me to." Martin didn't interrupt. "I go," she continued, "because he needs someone who understands what he's going through." A quiet beat. "And the second I feel like he's not safe, I walk away." Martin held her gaze. There was something almost curious in his eyes now, like he wasn't used to someone speaking to him like this, without fear, without hesitation. After a moment, he nodded once. Fine. It wasn't agreement. It was acceptance, on his terms. But it was enough. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Let me put him down first," she said softly. She slowly knelt again, careful not to startle the boy. "Hey," she whispered gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're okay. You did really good." The boy looked at her. Really looked at her. His eyes weren't panicked anymore. Just tired. And something else. Attached. She gave him a small smile. "Your dad's right here," she said softly. "You're safe." The boy hesitated. Then slowly, reluctantly, loosened his grip. Clara helped him stand, keeping one hand lightly on his shoulder as he steadied himself. For a brief moment, he looked between her and Martin, like he wasn't sure where to go. Then he took a small step, toward Clara again. The movement was quiet, but it said everything. Martin noticed. Of course he did. His expression didn't change much, but something deeper shifted behind it. Something he didn't say out loud. Clara gently rested her hand on the boy's back. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere right now." That seemed to settle him. Just enough. Martin turned slightly, already moving toward the door. "Samuel will take care of everything," he said over his shoulder. "We leave in 5 minutes." And just like that, it was decided. No discussion. No negotiation. Clara stood there for a second, the weight of what she had just agreed to finally settling in. 5 minutes. That was all it took to leave everything behind. Her job. Her apartment. Her normal life, as fragile as it was. She looked down at her uniform, at her hands, still slightly shaking. Then at the boy. He reached for her again. Not panicked this time. Just wanting. She took his hand. Warm. Small. Real. And something inside her, something she had buried for years, stirred quietly. They walked together toward the exit. Side by side. One step at a time. The rain outside hadn't stopped. It poured heavily against the windows, like the world itself was warning her. Or maybe washing something clean. As the doors opened, cold air rushed in. Clara paused for just a second on the threshold. Not looking back, but feeling it. The line she was about to cross. Once she stepped through, there would be no easy way back. The boy's fingers tightened around hers. She glanced down at him, and in that small, silent moment, she made her choice. Clara stepped forward into the rain, straight into a life she didn't understand, with a child who already felt like something she had lost once before. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet, unshakable feeling began to grow. This wasn't just a coincidence. Something about this boy felt like fate, and she had no idea just how close to the truth that feeling really was. The rain soaked through Clara's thin sleeves almost instantly. Cold, sharp, real. But the boy's hand in hers stayed warm. They moved quickly toward the black SUV waiting at the curb, its engine already running. The headlights cut through the rain like something alive, watching, waiting. Samuel stepped forward and opened the back door without a word. Clara hesitated just a fraction. Up close, the vehicle didn't just look expensive. It felt untouchable. Clean leather, tinted windows, the kind of silence that came from money most people never even saw in a lifetime. This wasn't her world. Not even close. "Get in," Samuel said quietly. Not aggressive. Not rude. Just certain. Clara looked down at the boy. "You want to sit by the window?" she asked softly. He didn't answer, just held onto her hand tighter. She gave a small nod. "Okay, we'll sit together." She climbed in, guiding him gently beside her. The door shut with a heavy final sound that echoed in her chest. Samuel took the front seat. Martin slid in on the other side, his presence filling the space without a word. The car pulled away smoothly. No sudden movement. No rush. Just controlled, like everything else in his life. For a while, no one spoke. Only the sound of rain hitting the windows, and the quiet hum of the engine beneath them. Clara sat still, aware of everything. The distance between her and Martin. The boy pressed lightly against her side. The way the city lights blurred outside, fading further the longer they drove. She didn't ask where they were going. Something told her it wouldn't matter. The boy shifted slightly. His head leaned against her arm. Careful, like he wasn't sure if it was allowed. Clara didn't move away. Instead, she adjusted just enough to make it easier for him. He let out a small breath. Not a cry. Not fear. Just relief. Her chest tightened. "You're okay," she whispered, so softly only he could hear. His fingers curled into her sleeve again. Still holding on. Still not ready to let go. Across from them, Martin watched. Silent. His eyes didn't miss anything. Not the way his son leaned toward her. Not the way Clara responded without hesitation. Not the quiet understanding between them that had formed in minutes, something he hadn't been able to create in months. His jaw tightened slightly. "You said he was having panic attacks," Clara said gently after a while, her voice breaking the silence. Martin didn't answer immediately. "He hasn't slept properly," he said finally. "He wakes up screaming. Won't eat. Won't speak to anyone." Clara glanced down at the boy. His eyes were half closed now, heavy with exhaustion. "When did it start?" she asked. Martin's gaze shifted to the rain-streaked window. "A few months ago." There was something in his tone. Something he wasn't saying. Clara noticed. But she didn't push. Not yet. "He's not being difficult," she said softly. "He's scared." Martin's eyes flickered back to hers. "I know what fear looks like," he replied. Clara held his gaze for a moment, then shook her head gently. "No, you know what control looks like when it's breaking." The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. Martin didn't respond. But something in his expression hardened, then softened again, almost too quickly to notice. The car slowed. The city had changed. Gone were the crowded streets, the noise, the life. Now there was space. Large gates. Long driveways. Houses that didn't just belong to people. They stood like statements. The SUV turned into one of them. The gates opened without a sound. Clara felt her stomach tighten. As the car rolled forward, the house came into view. It wasn't just big. It was overwhelming. Wide stone steps, tall windows, lights glowing softly through the rain. The kind of place that looked perfect from the outside, but carried a silence that felt too heavy inside. The car came to a stop. For a moment, no one moved. Then Samuel stepped out and opened the door. Cold air rushed in again. Clara looked down at the boy. "Hey," she whispered. "We're here." He didn't react right away. Just blinked slowly, still tired, still holding on to her. She smiled softly. "I'll stay with you." That seemed to be enough. She stepped out of the car, keeping him close. Martin followed. The moment they entered the house, everything changed. Warm light. Perfect floors. Expensive everything. But underneath it, silence. Not peaceful. Not comforting. Just empty. Clara felt it immediately. This place had everything, and somehow nothing. The boy hesitated beside her. His grip tightened again. She knelt slightly, brushing her hand gently through his hair. "It's okay," she whispered. But this time, he didn't calm right away. His eyes moved around the space, uncertain, distant, like he remembered something. Like this place wasn't safe in his mind. Clara felt it. That shift, that tension creeping back. She stayed close, didn't rush him, didn't let go. "Where's his room?" she asked quietly. Martin gestured upstairs. Clara nodded and slowly guided the boy forward. Step by step, up the staircase. The house remained silent behind them. No voices, no warmth, just footsteps echoing softly. When they reached the room, Clara pushed the door open gently. It was perfect. Too perfect. Everything in its place. Toys untouched. Bed made neatly. A child's room, without the feeling of a child living in it. The boy stopped at the doorway. Didn't move. Clara crouched beside him again. "Hey," she said softly. "You want me to stay with you for a bit?" He looked at her. Really looked. And then gave the smallest nod. Clara smiled. "Okay." She walked in with him, sitting gently on the edge of the bed. He climbed up slowly, still watching her, still unsure. She pulled the blanket over him just slightly. Not too much, not too little. Then sat beside him. Quiet, steady. After a moment, his body relaxed again. Just a little. His eyes started to close. Clara watched him, her chest rising and falling slowly. Then he shifted, turning his head slightly. And for just a second, something caught her eye. Right behind his ear. A small mark. Faint, but clear. Clara froze. Her breath stopped. Her hand trembled slightly as she leaned just a little closer, trying to see it again. Because something about that mark felt impossible, felt familiar. And deep inside her chest, something began to break open. Soft, slow, terrifying, like a truth she wasn't ready to face yet. Clara didn't sleep. She couldn't. She sat beside the bed through the quiet hours of the night, her hand resting lightly on the boy's back, feeling each slow, steady breath like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted back to that mark. That small, star-shaped mark. And every time she saw it, her chest tightened all over again. Her mind kept trying to argue with her, telling her she was wrong, telling her grief could play tricks. But her heart refused to let it go. She remembered the hospital room, the smell, the sound of machines, the way they took her baby before she could even hold him long enough. She remembered asking questions, begging for answers, and getting silence. Always silence. Her fingers curled slightly against the blanket. If this boy was really... No. She stopped herself. She couldn't think like that. Not yet. Not without proof. Not in a house like this. The door creaked softly. Clara looked up. Martin stepped inside, his presence quiet but impossible to ignore. He hadn't changed. Still in the same clothes. Still composed. Like the night hadn't touched him at all. His eyes moved immediately to the bed. To his son. Still sleeping. Still calm. Then to Clara. Still awake. "You stayed," he said. Clara nodded faintly. He needed someone. Martin stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "He hasn't had a night like this in months," he said. There was no pride in his voice. No control. Just something quieter. Something real. Clara looked at him carefully. You could have sat with him, she said gently. Martin didn't answer right away. His gaze remained on the boy. I tried, he said finally. He wouldn't let me. The words carried weight. Not anger. Not frustration. Just distance. Clara felt it. That space between father and son. Wide. Painful. Unspoken. He's not pushing you away, she said softly. He just doesn't feel safe yet. Martin's jaw tightened slightly. This house is the safest place in this city. Clara shook her head. Safety isn't walls and guards, she said. It's how someone feels when they close their eyes. Martin's eyes flickered toward her. Something in that hit deeper than he expected. Clara hesitated, then spoke again. What happened to his mother? The question hung in the air, heavy. Martin didn't look at her this time. His gaze stayed on the boy. She was killed, he said simply. Clara waited. But he didn't say more. Didn't explain. Didn't open that door. She understood. Some pain people don't talk about. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't know how. Clara nodded slightly. I'm sorry, she said. Martin didn't respond. But his hand moved slightly, like he almost reached for something, then stopped himself. Silence settled again. Soft. Tense. Clara looked back at the boy. He's carrying more than he should, she said. Kids don't know how to process that kind of loss. Martin finally looked at her. And you do. Clara met his gaze. I know what it feels like to lose a child, she said quietly. The room shifted. The words didn't come out loud, but they carried something deeper. Something that couldn't be faked. Martin studied her face. Carefully. You don't have a child, he said. Clara's throat tightened. That's what they told me. The honesty in her voice cut through the room. Martin didn't speak, but his eyes changed. Just slightly. As if something about her story didn't sit right with him. Clara looked away first. Back to the boy. Her hand gently brushing over his hair. He deserved better, she whispered. Both of them did. Martin followed her gaze. For a long moment, they stood there in silence. Two people from completely different worlds, connected by the same kind of loss. The boy shifted in his sleep. A small sound escaped his lips, not a cry, just a soft, broken whisper. Clara leaned in immediately. I'm here, she murmured gently. His body relaxed again. Just like that. Martin saw it. Every detail. Every reaction. And something inside him tightened. Not jealousy. Not anger. Something harder to name. Why you? He asked suddenly. Clara glanced at him. What do you mean? Why does he respond to you? Martin said. Doctors, therapists, none of them could reach him. Clara thought for a moment, then answered honestly. Because I'm not trying to fix him. Martin frowned slightly. She continued. I'm just listening. The simplicity of it sat heavy in the room. Martin didn't argue, didn't dismiss it, because deep down, he knew it was true. Clara looked at him again. You want him to stop hurting, she said. I get that. But you can't rush that. Martin exhaled slowly. And what would you suggest? Clara hesitated, then spoke carefully. Let him come to you, she said. Not as who you are, but as his father. Martin's eyes darkened slightly. I am his father. Clara nodded. I know. But right now, he doesn't feel that. The words were risky, but real. Martin didn't respond immediately. He looked at his son again. Long. Quiet. then turned away slightly, as if he needed distance from something he didn't want to face. Clara watched him, and for the first time, she didn't just see a powerful man. She saw someone who didn't know how to reach his own child, and that made him human. The boy stirred again. His hand moved across the blanket, searching. Clara caught it gently. "I've got you," she whispered. His fingers wrapped around hers instantly. Tight. Trusting. Martin saw that too. And this time, he didn't hide the reaction. His expression shifted. Something breaking through the control. Not anger. Not power. Just realization. Clara felt it in the air. That change. That quiet shift in everything. She looked down at the boy again. Then, slowly, back at Martin. And for a brief moment, an unspoken truth passed between them. Something neither of them said out loud, but both of them felt. Then Martin spoke again. Low. Careful. Almost hesitant. "What did you say your last name was?" Clara's heart skipped. For a second, she didn't answer. The question felt heavier than it should have, because something in Martin's voice had changed. Not sharp, not commanding. Careful. Like he was stepping toward something he didn't fully understand yet. She swallowed. "Hamilton," she said quietly. The name settled in the room. Martin didn't move. Didn't react right away. But his eyes, they shifted. Just slightly. Like a piece of something had clicked into place. "Clara Hamilton," he repeated under his breath. Not questioning. Remembering. Clara felt her chest tighten. "You already knew that," she said, her voice steady but low. Martin looked at her again. This time, longer. "Yeah," he said. "I did." Silence followed. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of something rising. Something neither of them had fully faced yet. Clara's fingers tightened around the boy's hand. Her voice came out softer now, but stronger. "Then you know what happened at that hospital." Martin didn't respond. But his silence said enough. Clara stood slowly, carefully placing the boy's hand back on the blanket. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake. She stepped closer to Martin, close enough to see the truth in his eyes. "I was told my baby died," she said. "No body. No answers. Just paperwork and silence." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "I spent years trying to understand what happened. No one would talk. No one would help." Martin looked away for a brief moment. That was all Clara needed. "You knew," she whispered. Not a question. A realization. Martin exhaled slowly. His shoulders dropped, just a fraction. Like something he had been holding for a long time was finally catching up to him. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he said. Clara's breath hitched. "What does that mean?" Martin ran a hand over his face, a rare crack in the control he had carried the entire time. "My wife, she couldn't have children," he said. "We tried. For years." Clara didn't speak. She just listened. The people around us, they didn't care about how. They cared about legacy, bloodline, power. His voice hardened slightly, but not with anger. With regret. There was a plan. Quiet. Controlled. No one was supposed to get hurt. Clara's chest tightened painfully. "But someone got greedy," he continued. "Someone made a decision that went too far." Her voice broke through, sharper now. "A fire," she said. "That's your version of too far?" Martin didn't deny it, didn't defend it, and that said everything. Clara stepped back slightly, her hand covering her mouth as the truth finally settled, heavy and undeniable. "They took him," she whispered. "They took my son." Martin's silence confirmed it. Tears filled Clara's eyes. Years of pain, of unanswered questions, of empty nights, all crashing into one moment. She turned toward the bed, toward the boy. Her boy. Alive. Breathing. Right there. Her voice broke completely now. "You let me believe he was dead." Martin's jaw tightened. "I didn't know until later," he said. "And when I found out, it was already done." Clara shook her head. "That doesn't make it right." "I know," he said quietly. The room fell still. Heavy. Raw. Clara walked slowly back to the bed, her hand trembling as she reached out, gently touching the boy's hair. Her son. She had been standing next to him, holding him, calming him, and she didn't even know. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I called him son, and I didn't even know," she whispered. Martin watched her. For the first time. He didn't look like a powerful man. He looked like someone who had made a choice, and lost something he could never replace. "He needed you," Martin said softly. Clara looked at him. "He needed his mother," she replied. The words hit harder than anything before. Martin didn't argue, didn't defend, because he knew. She was right. Silence stretched between them again. But this time, it felt different. Not tense, not threatening, just honest. Clara took a deep breath, then sat beside the boy again, her hand resting gently on his back. "I'm not taking him away from you," she said after a moment. Martin looked at her, surprised. Clara's eyes stayed on the child. "He already lost one parent," she continued. "I'm not going to make him lose another." Martin's expression shifted. "You would stay?" he asked. Clara nodded slowly. "For him," she said. "Not for this house. Not for your world. For him." Martin took a step closer. "He deserves both of us," Clara added, "even if we come from completely different lives." Martin stood there, quiet, processing. Then finally, he nodded. A small movement, but real. "I don't know how to fix what I've done," he said. Clara looked up at him. "You don't fix it," she said gently. "You do better from now on." The boy stirred again. His eyes slowly opened, confused at first, then soft, when he saw Clara. "Hey!" she whispered, smiling through her tears. He reached for her instantly. She took his hand. Then gently, she looked at Martin. A quiet invitation. Martin hesitated, just for a second. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. The boy looked at him, uncertain. Clara squeezed his hand gently. "It's okay," she whispered. The boy hesitated, then reached out. Small, careful, but real. Martin froze for a second, then took his son's hand. And in that moment, something shifted. Not power, not control. Something deeper, something human. Because in the end, it wasn't money or fear or power that saved that child. It was a single word, spoken with love. Son. And sometimes, that's all it takes to bring someone back home. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe, and tell me in the comments which part of the world you're watching from.